Okay, so I only did sort of two sides, and it's not necessarily beautiful yet, and probably there are a number of things that I would have done differently. But the only other thing that I want us to get through in order to start moving toward renderings for next week is to actually generate the base volume, right? So what is the void for the space, and start to get us thinking about connections to the outside versus inside, and basically create an architecture out of this. So let's see. Did I delete that form? I think I did. I deleted this, didn't I? Where did I put? Oh, that's right. I put it on here. Okay, so this is the volume that I had, and I'm going to move it back to that layer for now. Actually, let me leave it on this layer. I'll just change that color to be kind of blue-ish. All right. So really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a sort of relationship between the inside and outside. So on this model, I left the front side open. On some of yours, you did not. So you'll need to think about the transition that happens at like a corner like this, right? How do you get in? How do you get out? Um, on this one, I'm just going to have sort of a sort of cascading, almost like ramping floor that goes underneath the actual building itself, and I'll start to build up geometry from underneath afterwards. And then from that side, I'm probably just going to ramp in. But the simple form here that I'm going to start with is to go into my side view and then just generate the actual curve. And I'll have to do that with project on. And I'm going to take a I guess I could do it as a control point curve. That should be fine. I'll do it in layer 5 as well. And I'll start from the top end, and then I'll just start to try and take that geometry down. And it could be, it probably should be a 4 or 5 point curve. So you should probably pull one curve out to a point like that, and then pull another one down a little more like that, and then pull this one to the end closer to there, right? And what you probably want to end up at, actually, to be honest, I want to switch that. Start from here, go a little bit in, and I snapped to something that was really terrible. Turn that center point off. There we go. Something more like that. Okay. I'm going to dip down a little faster, and then I'm going to try to flatten out here toward the end. Something more like that. That should be fine. And I'll work, and that's a really extreme curve, and I just want to measure what that distance is to see if it's really kind of what I'm hoping for. So distance from there to the underside, that's 31 feet. So that's way too deep. In fact, you know, like my whole building is kind of oversized, but I'm just going to try and shallow this out. So I'll turn on my edit points, and I'll just take these bottom two, and I'll kind of yank them up more like that. And in fact, this one can come up a little bit too. And that's enough rigor for me on that one. Okay. Turn project off, and you can move this into place. For me, it's right there. And then I'm just going to extrude that curve and pull it over here. Okay, so that's one thing. It's really nothing special. It's just a slight ramp that kind of pulls you into the space. No big deal. But what happens on the other side, because I have this gap on the backside, is I actually just need to pull this geometry, Control, Shift, click that bottom surface, and you can just yank that whole thing down like that. Okay, so now when you're inside your space, whatever this thing actually is, let me switch it to a lens length that's going to allow me to see more of it. So 35 millimeter possibly. Or maybe even a 22. Where am I? Oh, yeah, there we go. 22. Get inside of that thing. Right, so this is where you're really going to be able to see a lot of the architecture that surrounds this particular element. Okay, now, you know, this the thing that we made, right, doesn't really have a program yet. So what we're going to, and side note, 22 is probably way too crazy. But what we're going to be doing is really just kind of infusing some basic elements into it. So part of our exercise is to get some like levels that are in the space. Since this is a multi-story kind of condition, what I'd like you to do is focus on those program blocks that you have, right? These right here. And you could very easily just Control Shift and click the bottom surfaces of each of these, if I can ever get this thing to work the way I need it to. There we go. So you'll grab all of your bottom surfaces, and then you can really just kind of pull that in. And start to work off of those planes, right? Trim them down, shape them. It doesn't have to be perfect, but what we're going to do is start to look at how do you ramp between the different elements in this space, okay? So it doesn't matter if you have this cascading ramp going down in the front, or if you decided to, take a ramp in from the outside, or potentially even have people enter, down one of these slopes and then up in between your panels somewhere or something like that. Be creative. It doesn't have to be beautiful or perfect yet. The way that we're going to make it look good is through rendering. Okay, so this is a very theoretical kind of assignment, right? This isn't something that needs to be a completed architectural work, okay? And I'm going to sort of throw at you a few grasshopper definitions that are going to help you, make this thing kind of believable, something that's going to lend well to a portfolio development. Any questions? And to make this thing kind of read a little better, just the last note here, this is actually, whoops, I had too much stuff selected. These elements are probably going to extend quite a bit. Whether it's an infinite space or if we just do another, studio level development model. But the idea is that when you go into your rendered views, let me turn these curves off.
Oh yeah, they look a lot better.
Right, the idea here is that you start to perceive a more direct connection between the architecture and the landscape, right? And that, in essence, it creates further program in a way, and you can program that kind of space. So anyway, I hope that at this point, this is a pretty intriguing architectural typology. A little bit of a theoretical exercise, and that you're starting to understand a little bit more about the capabilities of Rhino in blending things together, generating, imperceivable or areas that are not easy to conceptualize in a preconceived way. Okay, so that's it. I want you to be at this point where you're able to perceive your platforms, and if you get to a point where those are done and you want to move forward a little bit more and just explore that space, explore like ramping between the different elevation levels, by all means, go for it. That's a cool shot.